Shabbat Shalom. A Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim write a letter. Sounds like the opening of a joke, but this is no joke. This past week, the leaders of MRC Entertainment themselves, the three of them, a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim, wrote a letter about the documentary, which had been recently completed, and they were due to release about Kanye West. Their letter said that they will not be moving forward with this documentary. In their words, we cannot support any content that amplifies his platform. Last week, Kanye West announced on Twitter, after a 2-year hiatus, that he was going DEFCON 3 on the Jewish people. He reiterated his anti-Semitic rhetoric as a guest of Fox News's Tucker Carlson. The full footage was discovered and released after being edited out of the broadcast. Following this, a hate group draped a banner across the freeway in Los Angeles proclaiming a new slogan: Kanye was right. Lord Jonathan Sacks has famously called anti-Semitism the virus that mutates constantly throughout history. In the letter that MRC Entertainment wrote, they emphasized this point. They wrote, Kanye is a producer and sampler of music. Last week, he sampled and remixed a classic tune that has charted for over 3,000 years. The lie that Jews are evil and conspire to control the world for their own gain. This song was performed a cappella in the time of the pharaohs Babylon and Rome, went acoustic with the Spanish Inquisition and Russia's Pale of Settlement, and Hitler took the song electric. Kanye has now helped mainstream it in the modern era. Anti-Semitism has been in America as long as Jews have been here. It is not new. Anti-Semitism sometimes is the passing on of a lie, sometimes based on a miscommunication or a mistranslation. Anti-Semitism is often based on a lie that is based on an assumption of an experience of one person with one other person. It's based on a lie that feeds on fear. There is now a new lie that has become a popular refrain across college campuses, social media platforms, and news outlets. The letter from MRC Entertainment continues saying that this lie is fast becoming part of mainstream thinking and puts Jews in a terrible philosophical corner. The lie goes as follows. If you support Israel's right to exist, you are racist. If you are a Jew, you support Israel's right to exist. Therefore, if you are Jewish, you are racist. How can this false logic, these lies, gain so much traction? Here's my hypothesis. 1, because it makes the person saying it feel better about themselves. Using their own false logic, they can say that if they don't support Israel's right to exist, then they aren't racist, and therefore they are a good person. Doesn't work that way. Number 2, people don't believe there are consequences for saying something anti-Semitic. There haven't been many in the past. Various people have made comments over the past many weeks about how someone could say they can make any comment about any other race or minority in the world, and the world would shut them down. They'd be fired from their job, their social media accounts would be locked. This doesn't happen when someone says something negative about the Jews. One Jewish comedian even joked, the worst that will happen is that they're invited to a Holocaust museum, which is a horrible idea because they'd love it. They'd walk out with all sorts of ideas. Number 3, Kanye West has a massive voice. To put it into perspective, Kanye has 18.4 million followers on Instagram alone. As of 2020, there were an estimated 14.8 million Jews in the world. He has more Instagram followers than there are Jews in the world. That's a big megaphone. And anyone who hears his message, which has now been shared and reprinted and repeated over and over, if someone hears his message and agrees, that only makes his voice get louder. Number 4, we have a hard time believing that it's really that bad. In our Parsha this morning, it says, Noah was 600 years old, and the flood brought water upon the earth. Now, keep in mind, he's been building this boat for 150 years, a really long time. He's been involved in exactly building something that will save him from a flood, should a flood happen. Noah came with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Bereshit Rabbah, Midrash says, Rabbi Yochanan said, Noah didn't have enough faith. He didn't believe it would happen. If the water hadn't reached his ankles, he wouldn't have entered the Teva. According to this Midrash, even though Noah had spent years and years building the Teva, he didn't really believe that the Mabul, the flood, would happen until he saw the rain coming down and he actually felt wet. How many times have we said in history, it wasn't that bad. It could never happen here. We have a hard time believing that own truth. Number 5, those loud voices, that lack of belief that something could really happen, it makes Jews afraid to speak up in defense of our own religion or for Israel, because then, based on the false logic we said before, we ourselves may be labeled as racist. It doesn't make sense that we would lean into something like that when we know it's not true, but it makes us afraid. To speak out brings attention to ourselves. It's the same reason Jews casually request not to have their religion marked on surveys or hospital intake forms. It's the same reason we tuck our Jewish star necklaces into our shirt when we're somewhere new. It's the reason my professor told me that he would take his kippah off when he left the seminary. He explained by saying, what if someone took something that I did the wrong way? I didn't notice a pregnant woman on the bus and offer her my seat quickly enough. Or I was short with the person behind the counter after a long day of teaching and talking. I didn't feel like talking, but they took it as, oh, he's a Jew. He was afraid of someone seeing those very, very human errors and assuming he did them because of his religion, because he's Jewish. This is the fear that's out there. And it isn't lost on us that the worst attack on the American Jewish community occurred 4 years ago this past week. How do we fix it? Maybe going to a Holocaust museum is too big of a first step. But the conversation that happens around it, that's what's important. The story of the Tower of Babel, which we read also in this week's Parsha, is a story that tells of this fear of a multicultural tapestry of humanity in full view and in clear opposition to the desires and intentions of God in creating the world. This past week, I met with several clergy of various religions, and we planned our Why Dialogue Matters program for November 10th with St. Leo University and Center for Catholic Jewish Studies. As we discussed our plan for the evening, it came up that often we find people holding on to beliefs that we should have unlearned years earlier. The fact that, oh, I didn't know a woman could be a rabbi, or I still believe that God is that old guy with a beard sitting on a throne with the crown on his head, or whether or not Jews have horns, or whether or not they killed Christ, or whether or not someone who doesn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah will go to hell. These are things that the Catholic and Christian Church stopped teaching decades ago. They realized the hate of it. It was because of the Holocaust that they said, this can't be what we teach. This can't be our message. And they stopped teaching it. And yet, it's still being passed on. And yet, it's what children learn. And yet, even though we know that Jews do not have horns, that it's based on a mistranslation of the word Karen, which on some occasions can mean horn, but most likely means a crown of light. And yet, I've still been asked where my horns are. We're still passing on those messages. They need to be unlearned. And that's why we have to speak with each other, to show who we are, to get ourselves on the same page. Even if we speak different languages, we come from different backgrounds, even if we hold different beliefs, I think that speaking up, speaking out, speaking with each other is what will open the doors. It's what will keep us afloat. And it's what will help us build a world where we can spread God's love across the entire world, the entire land, as God requests that we do in our Parsha this morning. Shabbat Shalom. With speaking out and speaking up, we have to ask God for that koah, for that strength. And we'll do that as we say the Maftir Amidah. We turn to page 184. We rise for Chatzah Kaddish as Kalman leads us.